Welcome to Train Signal. You're watching a lesson on preparing for your CompTIA A+ certification exam. And really, what I should say is that you are preparing for one of your CompTIA A+ certification exams because there are technically two exams to becoming A+ certified. But this course that we've been going through for the last many lessons and many hours actually gets you ready for one of those two exams. And I have the details of that exam up on the screen right now. It is just simply called A+. They've gone through, over the years, they've called the two different exams various names. One was hardware, one was software. One was, I think, at one point called PC hardware. The other one was called operating systems, which, let's be real, that's the same thing as hardware and software. There were some other interesting names. They even talked about breaking it into more than two exams at one point. But at this point, as far as I can see from all official sources, they're just simply calling it the A+ exam with the code 220-801. All right, and then the second exam, which we have another course for that, is also just called CompTIA A+, but then with the number 220-802. And you have to take the 801 and 802 to get your A+ certification. All right, let's talk about 801. Here are the details, and these are the details as they are presented on the CompTIA website. And I will tell you, they are subject to change, and therefore, at the time that you're watching this, it may have changed from the time that I'm recording it. Okay, so please make sure you check with the CompTIA website to see if there have been any changes. But the information as it is presented today is that there will be a maximum of 90 questions on the exam. The passing score is a 675. Now, this is not 67.5%. Because they say on the site, and this can be a little bit deceiving, it talks about on a 900 scale. But what's not clear, and this is somewhat intentional, a lot of the different certification vendors have gone to this. What does that mean on a 900 scale? Does it mean it's 675 out of 900? Meaning, if you got every question wrong, does it mean that you would get a 0? Meaning, is it truly a scale of 0 to 900? Or I've also seen certain vendors where the scale is 100 to 900, okay, where it's really kind of an 800-point scale, and 675 is, 575 into that 800. Okay, that's something that they intentionally do not specifically disclose. Okay, so to give you an idea, if it is 675 out of 900, then that's a 75%. All right, just to give you an idea. Whereas if it was 675 and the scale is from 100 to 900, well, then from a percentage standpoint, it's theoretically only in the vicinity of about 72%. Okay, so, I don't want you to worry yourself with it, other than the idea is you probably need to get somewhere in the 70 to 75%. That's about how many questions you need to get right in order to pass this exam. Now, the length of the test they list as being 90 minutes. Okay, so you're not going to spend all day taking this test. It's an hour and a half. And they list that the only language, and I'm curious if this is true or not, but the only language listed, again, at least as of right now, on their website, is that it's in English. Okay, so if English is not your first language, first of all, I guess I'm sorry you've had to listen to my English the whole way through this course. But if that's not your first language, then you may want to check with the test center to see if you might be able to get an extension of time. I know with Microsoft certifications, they will do that. They'll give you extra time if you are forced to take the test in a language that is not your first language. So if need be, if you need that assistance, you need that extra time, try asking for it. I can't promise you if you're going to get it or not, but it's at least worth asking. Now, any other information that you might be thinking to yourself right now that you want to know about the exam that's not listed here, well, that means that information is not publicly available from the source. Okay, you may find information out on various websites that will tell you other information about the exam, but please keep in mind that that is not official, and that is information that maybe is not supposed to be disclosed. So you want to be careful with it. So what exactly is covered in this exam, right? We've gone through the specifics as far as how many questions, how long you get, all that good stuff. But what is, the exam itself? What does it cover? Well, this, and actually not only what you see on the screen right now, but what I'm going to have over the next few pages is literally straight from the CompTIA website and their exam objectives. Okay, so I'm going over the literals with you right now, and this is stuff straight from CompTIA. And that is the CompTIA A+ 220-801 exam covers the fundamentals of computer technology, installing and configuration of PCs, laptops, and related hardware, and basic networking. Okay, so that is what this exam generally covers. To get a little bit more specific with it, here are the objectives. And you will notice, by the way, that the first two objectives, there's 5 main, what some call objective domains. And PC hardware is what's known as 1.0. That's the number on that objective domain. And each of the bullets you see under it, like configure and apply BIOS settings, is actually considered 1.1. Differentiate between motherboard components, their purposes and properties is 1.2, and so on and so forth. Well, notice that the first 2, which is PC hardware and networking, they have a lot of sub-objectives, whereas the remaining 3 objectives are kind of quick and to the point. And that's why the majority of the course, I mean, I would say it's probably close to 2/3 of the course, is just on these first 2 main objectives. Okay, so starting off with PC hardware, let me kind of go down this list, and it's a long one. But as I mentioned, we have configure and apply BIOS settings, differentiate between motherboard components, their purposes and properties, compare and contrast RAM types and features, install and configure expansion cards, install and configure storage devices, and use appropriate media, differentiate among various CPU types and features, and select the appropriate cooling method, compare and contrast various connection interfaces and explain their purpose, install an appropriate power supply based on a given scenario, evaluate and select appropriate components for a custom configuration to meet customer specifications or needs. Given a scenario, evaluate types and features of display devices, identify connector types and associated cables, and install and configure various peripheral devices. Okay, can I take a breath now? So here's the deal. Could I have summed that up a little bit? Sure. I could have just gone down the list and said there's BIOS, there's motherboards, there's RAM, there's expansion cards, there's storage devices and media, there's processors and cooling, there's connection interfaces. I guess I could rename that one to I/O, right? Input-output interfaces and devices, power supplies, custom configurations, display devices, connectors and cables, and various peripheral devices. Do those summed up titles ring a bell to you? They should. And the reason they should is because I just kind of went through and named a good number of the lessons in this course. Because I know that the majority of people who are going to watch this course are looking to get certified, I intentionally went ahead and tried to make it as easy on you as possible by creating lessons that actually map to these specific objectives. That way we know we've covered everything, but more importantly, that way you know that if there's an area that you're struggling in, you know what lesson to go back and look at. Now, if we move on into the next main objective domain, which would be the 2.0, that's networking. And again, it's a lengthy list here. We have identifying network, and I'll summarize these. You can read on your own. They're on the screen, and you can go pull up the objectives from CompTIA. But basically, what do we have? We have network cables and connectors. And along those same lines, you'll notice the next one is characteristics of connectors and cabling. So those are kind of together as one item there. We have TCP/IP, ports, protocols. We have wireless networking, SOHO networks, internet connection types, various types of networks. We have different network devices and networking tools. Okay, again, maps out to a good number of the lessons in the course. So like I said, that right there, okay, so domain 1, PC hardware, domain 2, networking, that's like 2/3 of the exam right there. But then we move on into laptops. And you'll notice there's 3 of them here. Install and configure laptop hardware and components, compare and contrast the components within the display of a laptop, and compare and contrast laptop features. The bottom line is it's all about laptops. So I actually summed that up into a single lesson for you. Likewise, when it comes to printers, they only have the 3 subdomains, right? So this, by the way, printers, laptops was 3.0, printers is 4.0, and then of course you got 4.1, 2, and 3. They all kind of go together, so I summed it into a single lesson for you where we have the differences between the various printer types and the associated imaging process, installing and configuring printers, and performing printer maintenance. All right, so kind of just talked about all the different types of printers, the maintenance that would go with it, and talked a little bit about installing and configuring those printers. And then finally, the 5th domain, right? So 5.0 is operational procedures. This is broken into 4 different areas, and I did break it in this case into 4 different lessons. The good news is they're all shorter. I thought you needed some short lessons after a couple of lengthier lessons with laptops and printers. But basically, we talked about safety procedures, environmental controls, communication and professionalism, and dealing with prohibited content activity. All right, so again, what I'm hoping here is that you can realize how much this course mapped to these individual objectives that you're going to be tested on if you want to get A+ certified. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is go through just some of my own personal study recommendations. But before I do, I want to make it real clear. Back in the beginning of this course, I mentioned that nobody should tell you how to learn. And I don't try to tell my students how to learn. Okay, I convey the information and you figure out how to learn the information. Well, studying is the same thing. I'll make some recommendations. I will share with you things that I do. But the reality is that, well, you're going to have to learn what works best for you, what you get the most success with, and then go from there. Okay, so just some suggestions that I have here is to review all the lessons. And I do recommend that you review all the lessons if you are planning to get certified. Some people will say to themselves, you know what? I'm already familiar with that particular technology, so I'm not going to bother with that lesson. I've been guilty of that as well. When studying for a certification exam, I went and got a course, and then I just kind of skipped over parts of the course that I thought I was already familiar with. But you have to understand is that the course, is designed to cover everything. And sometimes even if you're already familiar with something, you need to hear it again shortly before going to take the exam. Or maybe I'll present something in a different context than you've ever heard it before, and it will help solidify something that you thought you already knew. So I recommend that you review all of the lessons. At least browse through them if you don't watch them in their entirety. Use the practice tests as additional study material. I need to really emphasize this one. The biggest mistake that people make is that they use practice tests as a practice test. Go figure. What I mean by that is they will open up a practice test. They will take the questions, they'll go through it, and then look at their score. And then they'll use that score to gauge whether they're ready to take the tests. And the problem is that this is a typical thing that'll happen. Somebody will open up a practice test, they'll go through, and they'll take it, and they'll get like a 50% on it. And they'll say, whoa, I'm not ready yet. They'll do a little more studying, and then they'll come back and take the test again. And they'll get a 75 or an 80%. And they'll say, whew, I'm feeling pretty good. I moved up from 50 to 75 or 80. I mean, that's a major improvement. But they'll study a little more, and then they'll take the test again, and they'll get a 90. And they'll keep doing this process until they get to the point that they're almost getting 100% on the exam. And this is the practice exam that I'm talking about. And they'll say, woohoo, I'm ready. The problem is that there are only a finite number of practice test questions. And once you've gone through and you have seen them, you're going to, if nothing else, subconsciously remember them. And you will study them. And you will learn the answers to those questions. But it doesn't mean that you are truly knowledgeable on the material and ready to take the real test, which is going to have different questions in the same arena, but different questions. I strongly recommend that you take the questions and use it as an opportunity to learn something. You will find practice questions that will be asked, and it will be on a topic that I covered, but I didn't necessarily specifically answer the question as I went through and taught you the topic. So you'll look at that question and you'll be like, I don't know, Ed didn't cover that specifically. That happens. Just like when you go to the real test, You'll get a question and you'll say, wow, Ed didn't cover that. Nor was there a practice question on that. Okay, that's reality. There's all kinds of different contexts and aspects of these topics that can be covered. So you want to make sure that you look at that practice test question that maybe I didn't answer specifically and go figure out the answer, research the answer, play with a computer, look at a computer, figure it out. Use that as an opportunity to learn. And let me tell you something. If you learn everything that I've taught you, and you learn everything that the practice tests are looking to teach you, I could all but guarantee you when you get to the real test, you're going to be ready. You're going to be able to answer those questions. Now, you still might see some question on that real test, and you'll be like, I have no idea what the answer to this is. It happens. I've had it happen to me on, I would say, probably every single exam I've ever taken. And I've taken a lot of them. I've lost count. Once I got to about 30 exams, I stopped counting. Okay, so I don't even know what the number is at this point. But, I mean, the bottom line is you need to learn as much as you can learn. That's what this is all about. It's not about memorizing practice test questions. All right, so you want to learn and be able to explain those questions. That's another tip that I give to everyone when using practice tests. Go through each question and don't move on through that question until you feel comfortable enough that you could grab a stranger off the street or maybe grab a loved one in your household and you could explain it to them and they'll look at you like you're nuts. Why are you explaining to me about the different aspects of RAM? But if you can truly explain it, like you could teach it to them, you're then ready to be tested on it. Okay, so that's one of the things I love about being an instructor is, well, that's my job. I have to learn how to teach it to somebody else, which gets me ready for these exams in a big, big way. Now, beyond that, you'll notice here I have practice, practice, practice. And I got cap letters there and an exclamation point at the end. The bottom line is that with this particular material, practicing is not, there's not as much doing as much learning in this particular instance. But regardless of that, you need to practice, look at, touch, learn. There's never enough when it comes to practicing. You want to experience stuff as much as possible. Tear apart a computer, disassemble it, reassemble it. Go buy computer parts and assemble a computer of your own. Go out and pretend like you're going to build a computer. Shop around for all the different motherboards, all the different cases, all the different power supplies, all the different memory, all the different processors, so on and so forth. Do this stuff. And when you think you've practiced enough, practice some more because it's never enough. And that's always true, even for me. I'm always trying to keep up on this stuff. I need to practice some more, even at this point in my career. And if necessary, the last bullet point I have there is if you truly find something that you are completely stuck on and you're just not getting it, it's all right to say to yourself, I need to give up on trying to learn it through this particular publication. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but I've had to learn over the years that as an instructor, sometimes I'm going to present something and someone out there just isn't going to get it. If you're finding yourself in that place, if need be, there are many other publications available. There are very inexpensive books that you could go down to the bookstore and buy or going online to Amazon or wherever you want to go and get the ebook, whatever you need to do. There's plenty of material out there. There's plenty of free material that's out there on the internet as well. So if you need to, go ahead and research elsewhere. I hope you don't have to. But at the same time, I don't want to stand here and say, you shouldn't need anything else and you better get everything right here in this course. And if you're not, then you're an idiot. No, that wouldn't be true at all. If there's something you're not getting, it doesn't mean that you're an idiot. And it also doesn't mean that I'm necessarily incompetent in presenting it to you. It just happens sometimes. Okay, so just don't be stubborn about it and feel free to look at other material if you need to. All right, so now let's talk about some exam preparation. And I'm going to start off by pre-qualifying this, just as I did with the study recommendations, is that you need to figure out what works for you. These are just some recommendations of what I do and maybe a little bit about what I suggest. So first of all, when you feel that you are getting there, right, you're almost ready, because you'll never actually feel ready. Please schedule your exam. Actually schedule it. Some people will tell you that you should do this when you first start studying for the exam. Okay. And instead of saying 1 to 2 weeks out, you set a goal for yourself. You say, I'll be ready in 3 months. And you just set that date. That way you have a goal and you have to meet that goal. Well, I agree with that. Okay. I agree that when you're getting close, don't wait until you feel you're 100% ready, because you'll never feel that way. You'll always start second guessing yourself, saying, well, maybe I need another couple days. Maybe I need another week. And maybe I need this. Maybe I need that. Stop it. If you finish the course, you've studied this stuff, you're going through the practice questions, you're feeling good about it, schedule the test. Give yourself another week or two to, finish building your confidence, but schedule it. And unless some, extenuating circumstance comes up, when you schedule it, keep your scheduled date. Go out there and actually take the test. Because that's another thing I've seen people do. They schedule the test 2 weeks out. They'll study it for the next 2 weeks. And then the day before, they'll say, I'm not ready yet. And they'll postpone it for another week or two. Don't. If you're getting close, schedule it and then give it a shot. Now, what do you do in that 1 to 2 weeks while you're waiting to go take the test? Make sure you continue to study, continue using the practice tests. When you get all the way up to the night before the test, what I do is at this point I will be lightly reviewing the material. I do not stay up and cram the night before. Now, other people, that's what they need to do, meaning just in general, in order to pass the test, every test they've ever taken in their life, they got to cram the night before. For me, if I'm not ready by the night before, I'm not ready. Okay, I'm as ready as I'm going to be. That last night of cramming isn't going to make the difference for me. If I've done my job correctly, I am ready 24 hours in advance. So all I'm doing is kind of lightly reviewing it to keep it fresh on my mind. Eat a good meal, do something fun, but not crazy fun. Okay, don't go out drinking with your friends. Okay, do something that is, I guess we could say, healthy fun or relaxing fun, and get to bed early. Now, why? Now, this is going to sound lame. You've been hearing this possibly your whole life from school teachers, but you know what? The bottom line is that the brain functions better when you're well rested. So get a good night's sleep. Right? You hear that all the time. The night before a big test, get a good night's sleep. Now, you'll notice that everything I'm talking about the evening before the test is kind of putting me into a nice, healthy, relaxed mode. Right? Eat a good meal so that I'm well nourished. Do something fun and relaxing so that I can not be stressed out. Get a good night's sleep. And the reason why is because the next day, right, I'm now moved up to the day of the test. I want to stay relaxed. Again, have a light meal before you go to the test center. Notice I emphasized there a light meal. Don't have a big heavy meal to where you're like, oh, I shouldn't have ate so much while you're trying to take a test. Have a light meal. But make sure you eat. I know a lot of people who get all nervous the day of a test and they don't eat, they don't drink. Well, guess what? The brain doesn't function as well when it's malnourished or dehydrated. Same as what I mentioned about getting a good night's sleep. It should be well rested. So have a light meal. Plan on getting there early. Now, they'll tell you when you actually sign up for the test to get there, I forget if they tell you 15 or 30 minutes early. I forget exactly what they say, but I say plan on arriving a little bit earlier than that. And the reason why is because, things happen. You might run into traffic or, some kind of a holdup, and you don't want to get stressed out about, oh no, I'm going to be late for my test. You don't need the stress. Keep yourself relaxed. And if you do get there early, right, if everything goes as planned and you actually get there half hour, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour early, many of the test centers will allow you, if you show up and say, yeah, I'm here for a test. I know it's only 12 o'clock and I'm scheduled for 1 o'clock, but I'll just hang out. Some of them will say, hey, if you're ready, we'll let you go ahead and test early, as long as there's a seat available. Okay, so if you get there early, no big deal. Now, when you get to the testing center, you want to have the two forms of identification that they're going to make you have, and this stuff is all explained when you register for the test. And I strongly recommend that you leave everything else either in your car if you drove, or even at home. Things like cell phones and calculators and study notes and pretty much everything, you name it. When I walk into a test center, I have my 2 IDs and my car keys in my pockets and nothing else. And the reason why is because depending on the test center, what they're instructed to do, and they've gotten to be stricter and stricter about this, is they confiscate everything. Matter of fact, last time they took my car keys, which made no sense to me at all, why they had to take my car keys. But anyway, they take everything from you. And again, you don't need the stress of wondering, hey, are they monkeying around on my cell phone? Are they going through my purse? Okay, so just don't bring the stuff in, and that way you don't have to worry about somebody else holding on to it for you. If you do have spare time, if you got there early and they can't get you in to take the test, well, maybe you lightly review the material. Some material, some practice test companies and stuff have flashcards that they let you print out. Okay, so maybe you bring some flashcards and you lightly quiz yourself while you're waiting. Okay, but don't stress out about it. Just keep yourself relaxed. So now it's time to take the test. When you are testing, here's the deal. Read the questions carefully. A lot of times, and this isn't as true with CompTIA tests as some other vendors, but sometimes they can be lengthy questions and they can be very distracting with details. So make sure you go through and read the questions carefully. One big mistake people make is they will not read all the answers. Right? They'll read a question, they'll see choice A, and they'll say, that makes sense, and they'll select it. Whereas if you would have looked at B, C, and D, you might have noticed that option C made more sense than A, and that was actually the correct answer. So make sure you look at all the answers all the time. Eliminate the ones that are obviously wrong. Okay, if you know that, if you look at A, B, C, and D, if you look at the 4 choices, and it's not always 4 choices, but let's say you have a question and there's 4 choices, and you look at them, and you see 2 of the answers are just ridiculous. You're like, those aren't right. Well, then obviously you've made your life a lot easier because you're now narrowing the answer. Even if you're unsure, you've now narrowed it down to a 50-50 guess, right? Because there's only 2 remaining choices. So eliminate the ones that are wrong and then select from the remaining. Please make sure you answer all questions. You do not get penalized for answering a question wrong. In other words, if you don't answer a question, it's wrong, meaning it's the same thing as if you answered it wrong. In the old days, there were certain tests where if you answered wrong, you actually were subtracted points. So it was actually better to skip a question that you didn't know than to answer it. That's not how it works here. If you answer it wrong, you get 0 points for that question. If you just skip the question, you get 0 points for that question. So you're much better off even if you have to guess, because you might get lucky and guess it right, and then you get some points for the question. So make sure you answer everything. And here's another big one. You have up to as many as 90 questions, and you have 90 minutes. That's a lot of questions in a short time frame. Now, fortunately, again, CompTIA, they tend to give you short questions. There's not a lot of reading, so it's not that big a deal. But you could be running short on time. So here's what I strongly recommend. Mark the questions that you are not sure about and come back to them at the end. These exams, you're allowed to skip questions and come back. Okay, you can skip around. If you were to just go through the test and answer question 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5, and you don't go on to the next question until you have figured out your answer, what could happen is you might get to question 5, and you'll take 20 minutes racking your brain trying to come up with the answer. And then you move on. And then the problem is you suddenly get to question, let's say, 85 out of 90. Let's say you get the worst scenario, you get 90 questions. You're on question, I won't even say 85. Let's say you're on question 80, and you've completed it. So you have 10 questions left, and you look up at the clock, and it says you have less than a minute left. And you panic, and you go, oh my goodness, I have less than 1 minute to answer 10 more questions. So what do? You just click on each one, and you guess, right? You just say C, 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 and you say, some of those, C had to be the right answer, so hopefully I got some right. Well, here's the problem with that. What if questions 81 through 90 were the 10 easiest questions on the entire exam? And you just guessed on those, and you only got 2 or 3 of them right, when you could have had all 10 of those right. Whereas there were some questions earlier on in the test that you didn't have a clue. You spent 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes trying to figure them out, and you got them wrong anyway. What I recommend is that you skip those. Go through the 90 questions, or however many you get. Answer the ones you know. Spend the initial time going through and saying, these are the ones I actually know, so I'm going to answer them first. Definitely get them right. I can waste time going back and guessing on the hard ones that I didn't really know the answers to anyway. As a matter of fact, I will tell you that when I take the exam, when I go through, I make 3 passes. What I do is I will go through once and answer the ones I know. So hypothetically, let's say there's 90 questions and we'll say 70 of them. I looked at the question and I was like, bam, I know the answer to that. And I answered it. Then from there, of the remaining 20 questions, there might have been 10 of them that I was like, well, I was kind of able to narrow it down to a 50-50. It could have been A, could have been B, but I'm not sure. I go back and do those next. And then my third pass will be those remaining 10 that I was like, I don't have a clue where that question came from. I have no idea what the answer would be. Let me read them again, and maybe I'll just try to deduce myself to the correct answer. And then that way, if by the time I get to those last 10 that I'm just kind of guessing on anyway, if I look up at the clock and see that I've got less than a minute left, I can say, okay, let's just go ahead and guess at these last 10. I didn't know them anyway. All right, so that's just, again, my strategy, my recommendations. Nobody can tell you the right or wrong way to take a test. But here's the deal. Don't panic. That's what it all comes down to. Stay relaxed. You took the time. You prepared. Do not panic. It's okay if you're not sure of the answer to a few questions. I just laid out a scenario for you where maybe I didn't know the answer to 10 of the questions. It's not unusual to see questions that you don't know. It happens almost every time. Keep in mind that you don't have to get a perfect score. There's a saying that I've always said in my classroom, which is, I used to ask my students to say, what do you call a medical student that graduates last in their class? And the answer, and I already have it up on the screen for you, the answer is you still call them doctor. If you pass, you pass. And remember, CompTIA only requires you to get a 675. They don't expect you to know everything. They expect you to know enough to prove to them that you deserve to be a PC technician. And with that, I will send you off with a real simple good luck on your A+ certification exam. But here's the deal, and I always say the same thing. Whenever I hear people all the time, they go to take a test and they're like, oh, good luck on the test. What does luck have to do with it? I hope luck has nothing to do with it. I hope you're not hoping to be lucky and pass the exam. If you've done your job, you have studied, you have prepared, and you won't need luck. Okay? So yes, good luck is something that we say all the time, but the reality is, have fun. I guess I could say that. Have fun. Do great things. Whatever. Go pass the test. And with that, I do thank you for watching. I hope that I gave you some, at least one or two tips and tricks that you could actually take from this that will help you to get ready for the exam. And, well, I'll go ahead and say it. Good luck on the exam. And I'll see you in the next lesson.